Hi, I'm Robert Wright. I run the Non-Zero Foundation, which produces all the shows on Blogging Heads TV and Meaning of Life TV. We host a variety of voices, some of them pretty unorthodox, and we encourage dialogue that is sharp but civil. We think fostering constructive conversation is especially important now that America and the world are looking kind of fragile. If you agree that our mission is important, I hope you'll consider helping us shoulder the cost. You can do that by becoming one of our cherished patrons at patreon.com/nonzero foundation. That's NONZEROFOUNDATION. Thanks. We need your help, and we deeply appreciate it.
Hi, welcome to Blogging Heads TV. This is Culturally Determined. I'm your host, Aryeh Cohen-Wade. This is a very special episode because my guest today has been plucked from the viewership / listenership, responding to a challenge that I issued in the last episode we put up, which was with Glenn Loury, where I wanted to talk to someone who was a Trump supporter about the election, and we had a volunteer. We had a couple volunteers, but the one who's appearing before us was the lucky winner. Almost like this is like a fan plucked from the audience for a cameo appearance, but hopefully it'll be more than that. And so, with no further introduction, my guest is John Guthrie. So, John, can you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, hey everybody. I'm not even super comfortable with the moniker of Trump supporter, but I guess technically I am a reluctant Trump supporter. I just voted for the guy, so we got that.
Okay, so
John,
you already voted.
I've already voted. Yep. Okay, John Guthrie.
Tell us some more about you. Yourself.
Yeah. So I'm 35 years old. I teach English and critical thinking at a community college in North Carolina. No need to name the institution. I probably shouldn't be doing this, so we'll leave that part out. But yeah, I guess we can pretty much leave it at that. For now. If you have other questions, feel free to ask.
Okay. Well, thank you for volunteering and being brave enough to appear on camera, so that YouTube commenters can tear you apart, or perhaps
that's right,
congratulate you on what a great job you did making me look like a fool, which is probably more likely. So you're an English professor. I talked about in the Glenn episode I was an English major, so that's
I noticed that. Yeah,
an interesting contrast to English, I guess, former English majors squaring off. Okay, so what do you what is your general political background? Because I think when you messaged me, you said you called yourself a libertarian with a small L. Yeah,
exactly. And honestly, that was one of the reasons I thought I'd reach out to you. In your and Glenn's last conversation, he was, as he's done before, I'm a big fan of his, he was still manning the potential hypothetical Trump supporter, not Glenn, but here's what one may say. And I thought that was interesting. And you mentioned, surely there are going to be Republican voters who always vote Republican no matter what. And there are going to be Democratic voters who always vote Democrat no matter what. And I think that's right. We know what those conversations sound like. But I thought I would reach out because I'm really neither one of those. I've kind of always been a libertarian, I would say, since I really started having my own political ideas. Libertarian with a small L, so I'm not active in the Libertarian Party politics. I never have been. I typically don't vote just because I really feel like nobody ever represents my values, my beliefs. So I typically just sit on the sidelines. Occasionally I'll lob a protest vote across the lines, but that's really it.
Mm-hmm. And did you? So that's interesting that often you don't vote. Would you consider yourself like a swing voter? The media is always talking about swing voters. Although interestingly, less this year. Seems like we're thinking most people probably have an opinion at this point, and there's fewer people in the middle. But would you call yourself a swing voter?
I guess in this case I am, which, I agree. That does seem to be the assessment that people, they've made up their minds and, we're just going to see what it is. But I think it's hard to say, right? There aren't many libertarians, first of all. as a libertarian, I can tell you that's the case, right? When you move throughout the world, you're not usually in you don't usually have many ideological companions. But in this case, I probably am. And I do have to think that there are people like me, whether they identify as libertarian or not, maybe politically inactive folks who are going to step up for the first time, probably to both camps in this election. I wouldn't be surprised if that turns out to be a major force that hasn't really been factored in.
Yeah, and all the polls, they have they poll registered voters, and then at a certain point they do likely voters, and they determine that somehow. I guess maybe they ask do you know where your polling place is, or have you voted in the past, things like that. So they determine and then cut out some amount of people, and since this is an unusual time to have an election, maybe they're cutting out too many people or something, so it's hard to know exactly. So did you vote in 2016?
I did not. No.
Was that a conscious kind of neither appeals to me sort of thing?
Yeah, exactly. Couldn't really bring myself to do it. I remember thinking at the time, if somebody put a gun to my head and asked me who do you want to win, I probably would have reluctantly said Trump. Mm-hmm. But I wasn't anywhere close to voting for the guy. I think the last time I voted in a presidential election would have been in 8 and 12 when I voted for Ron Paul. So yeah, that's sort of the background there.
Okay, and did you think about voting for the Libertarian candidate either in 2016 or 2020? Because it was Gary Johnson in 2016 who was the most, I don't know if reputable is the right word, but he was the closest thing to a mainstream candidate that the Libertarian Party had that I know of.
Yeah, I didn't, and if I recall my thinking at the time, I think I'd kind of gotten to the point where I just didn't see much of a future in that. Years ago, I came to the decision that people just did not agree with my political philosophy, the views that I held. What I found to be important, most people don't find to be important. So if you rewind to college years. Through my 20s, I'm 35 now. I was the guy who was always trying to have a conversation with somebody about politics, political philosophy, economics, whatever. And I still am, but I realized that, I didn't see a future in the country becoming more liberty minded. So I kind of just said the hell with it.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah. So it's interesting because I think so my understanding of people who don't vote or who kind of choose in between is that they are less likely to have a set political ideology that they subscribe to, and they maybe have. I discussed this before. They maybe have a mishmash of beliefs. Maybe they're very anti-abortion, but they really care about Medicare and Social Security or something. So that's not a position that that aligns with one party, and so they could go back and forth, or they just have atypical political beliefs that don't really fit into either party. But libertarianism is an established philosophy, and there's a party, and certainly I would say they're sort of overrepresented. Libertarianism and libertarian ideas are overrepresented in sort of the commentariat or in elite opinion compared to the nation at broad. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would. I would say some of my discomfort with that is that it tends to be roped into conservatism, and usually what it looks like, at least historically, is I'm a libertarian because I am more free market than my conservative fellow travelers or something to that effect. And as a little L libertarian, that always kind of pissed me off because they wouldn't talk about criminal justice reform. They wouldn't talk about, a more non-interventionist foreign policy. It was always just, the meme is something along the lines of, I want my taxes to be extremely low, therefore I'll call myself a libertarian. And that, that's not the camp that I'm in. So I never really felt like many in the pundit class who use the label, represented me. Mm-hmm. But they're definitely out there. the word is used a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Cato Institute punches above its weight in terms of getting its ideas out there. I remember that at one point, this was like a decade or so ago, there was a Blogging Heads commenter who was complaining about the ideological, how many people in the various ideological divisions we had on the site, and started keeping a tally. And according to this person, as I recall, it was like roughly 40% liberal, progressive, 30% conservative, and the rest libertarian. And people like Will Wilkinson, Megan McArdle, like used to, they were kind of in the blogosphere world, that they were kind of prominent voices. And some of them have changed. Wilkinson has become, I think he abandoned libertarianism at some point in the past couple of years. But yeah, I know as someone who reads articles, I feel like I'm more exposed to libertarianism than other, niche, or however you want to describe them, political philosophies. Although, like maybe you could compare it to like socialism, and there's certainly been a resurgence in writing about socialism and people calling themselves democratic socialists or whatever over the past couple of years. Okay, so have you, do you ever vote for Democrats?
No.
Okay.
But,
what about for congressional races or for Senate or anything like that?
No, but I mean, the other side of that is I don't think I'd voted Republican except for Ron Paul ever.
Okay.
And if I remember correctly, in those elections, I voted, straight. I voted for Ron Paul, and then I just, protest voted Libertarian for everybody else. In this case, I find myself as a, basically straight Republican ticket voter.
Okay, that's interesting. Okay, so so Jo Jorgensen is this woman who is the Libertarian candidate. I honestly know almost nothing about her. She hasn't broken through. Trump absorbs all the energy in the media. Did you think about voting for her at all? Or
I thought about it. I literally listened to one interview with her, and she just didn't resonate with me. The thing with the Libertarian Party is, again, I don't see them doing an awful lot when it comes to the idea world. I mean, like you say, you have Cato and organizations like that who do some great work. They do a pretty good job getting the word out there. So if I were going to vote Libertarian, to me it would basically just be a protest vote. And in this election, I, for reasons I'm sure we'll get into, decided that I would rather see Trump win. Mm-hmm. This is the first election where I actually find myself voting for the lesser of two evils, right? I used to be the guy when people would say, I'd be like, what's wrong with you? Don't vote for evil. That's the answer. Stop voting for evil, right? Mm-hmm. And in this case, I'm finally like, all right, Jesus, I'll hold my nose and I'll vote for the lesser of two evils. Okay,
that's interesting, because one of the things I've been thinking about the election is that Trump has basically not expanded his coalition beyond what it was. He got 46 roughly percent and managed to eke out a victory in this weird double bank shot, triple bank shot kind of way. But you are a counterexample to that, because you didn't vote last time for Trump, and now you're doing it. So I guess we might as well move into the meat of this. So why do you decide that this was the time when you needed to take a stand and vote for Trump, and do so publicly, at least as public as this podcast, videocast?
Yeah, absolutely. Is? Yeah, heads all over the world just exploded. So for me, so I'm a big gun rights guy, right? As far as traditional libertarianism goes, I definitely fit in that box. That's always been the case. Typically, I kind of would listen to what's going on, and I would just sort of shrug my shoulders and say, Democrats are paying sort of the lip service they have to pay toward gun control, but I'm not too concerned about it. I don't see anything actually coming down the pike. And then, when the Democratic debates happened, they were falling over each other to be the most pro-gun control candidate on the stage. And it probably has something to do with me being older and having, literally owning more guns. So it's more personal. Mm-hmm. I think we should separate these two out. if I didn't care about anything else, I wouldn't be shocked if I were voting for Trump just for the gun issue. But with that being said, if I weren't a gun supporter, a gun guy, I wouldn't be surprised if I were still voting for Trump for other issues. So, and, you know, like you were saying with Glenn, if it's just the gun issue, that guy usually votes Republican, right? No matter what, that's a big driver.
Right.
So in this case, it did tip the scale for me. You know, the only caveat there is like if, let's say somebody like Tulsi Gabbard would have won the nomination. I don't even remember what her policy was on the gun issue. I would have enthusiastically voted for Tulsi Gabbard.
Why's that?
She just seemed like a reasonable, decent human. She didn't seem like the typical politician who, you know, for the Democrats is going to pay lip service to these ideals and then not do anything. Yeah, so as I was saying, you know, my main complaints with Obama were from the left. So I was really hoping to see something more substantial when it came to criminal justice reform. I think he brought the jail terms for possession of crack and powder cocaine closer to parity. I think it was like 18 times more, and he brought it down to 3 or something like that. But he didn't do much else, and that was a tremendous disappointment for me. You know, the thing that drove me crazy in the beginning, if you remember, he campaigned on no immunity for telecoms when it came to the unwarranted wiretaps and spying. Quickly that went away. You know, I was hoping he would draw down our involvement in Afghanistan and Iraq. That didn't happen.
Well, I mean, the Iraq basically did eventually, and that's kind of what let the Islamic State, like, you know, come to power, and then there was a re-ramp up. So there was some of that, but
you know, that's obviously complicated, right? Like whether the surge was a good idea or not, should we have stayed? It's complicated. But at the time, that was one of my complaints with him. So, you know, I don't even remember how we got on to Obama, if I'm being honest.
Well, so you mentioned you know, guns being a major issue for you. So yeah. I would just say, I guess maybe I'm like political, like 180 degrees political opposite for you on the gun issue.
Yeah.
But you know, it's the issue where I am most resigned to there being no movement whatsoever. I mean, the moment when something could have happened would have been after the Sandy Hook shooting. You know, Obama reelected handily, had control of Congress, and this awful event happens, and there seems to be some sort of groundswell, and they try to do it and they fail, and there really hasn't been anything since then. There's been rhetoric like Beto O'Rourke said he was going to take everyone's AK-47s or something. I mean, if you just imagine, I can't possibly imagine any sort of gun confiscation thing ever happening, let alone passing in our system of government. And there's so many, you know, there's more guns than people in the country. So it almost seems like a lost cause from my perspective. And so that's something I'm bummed out about. I actually don't know what Biden, I guess the 94 crime bill probably had some gun stuff in it, but I don't exactly remember what that was, but it's certainly not like a central plank this time. And maybe Trump talks about it sometimes, but but there hasn't been, I guess except for the movement that started after the Parkland shooting with March for Our Lives created by these students at the from the high school, that did re-energize things. But again, there really hasn't been anything even close to happening on that. So do you see that as a threat that you want to prevent from happening? Yeah,
totally. So I agree with everything you just said. In fact, you know, if I were to look at it objectively, and if I were to play, you know, Democratic operative, I would say, hey guys, just stop talking about it for a while, at least during election season. Like you're not helping yourself. Democratic voters are already, you know, somewhat pro gun control, right? Like you didn't need them to tell you that. I literally don't understand why they campaign on it. But yes, so Biden's platform, you know, it was on his website. You did kind of have to seek it out. There were some pundits in the gun world who were talking about it, but Biden himself wasn't really pushing it out. A buddy of mine actually, right before we got on the call, sent me this from Biden's Twitter. It's long past time we take action to end the scourge of gun violence in America. As president, I'll ban assault weapons and high-capacity magazines, implement universal background checks, and enact other common-sense reforms to end our gun violence epidemic. And, that's the policy or the position that basically they all took this go-around. So I agree it would be difficult, but if there's a Democratic president and if the Democrats control the House and the Senate, I would imagine they would try to enact, those policies. The banning of assault weapons in the gun world, basically everybody owns AR-15s. It's one of the most common guns in the country. We could go down that rabbit hole if you want to. But, when politicians start talking about banning assault weapons, you're literally telling millions of people that they, won't be able to purchase more of those. And usually there's something like a mandatory registration. Some people like Beto come out and say, we're going to take them. Other people will say, we're not going to take them. We'll do some sort of buyback and you'll have to register it, maybe pay an extra tax. But typically what that involves is if you weren't to do that, then you would just become a felon. So it puts gun owners in this awkward position where either A, I'm a felon, or B, I'm going to do something which will make it much more likely for a confiscation to happen at some point. In the gun world, at least for me, I obviously can't speak for everybody. It's less about, do I think this is going to happen tomorrow? And it's more about, could it happen in 50 years? To which I say, of course it could. Absolutely. So I do think it's important to push back against those kinds of things. And then, high capacity magazines, that's usually anything over 10 rounds. And basically any handgun, any semi-automatic handgun is going to be more than that. Not all of them, but the vast majority. Your standard semi-automatic handgun usually has a magazine of, around 15. So, you're talking about, if you concealed carry, you're talking about what people usually, carry on like a day-to-day basis. So, so that's sort of the gun issue in a nutshell. And again, if I'm a Democratic operative, hey, just guys, stop saying that. Wait until you get into office and then try to pass it. Like, I don't know what you're doing. I don't even know where you're doing that.
Yeah. I think, the gun issue, my understanding is, there's how many things out there are there people, there's a large group of people who are single issue voters about them. It's probably like guns and abortion, absolutely, and maybe that's it.
It is. I think
so there's some, a minority, definitely, but a very, impassioned minority who deeply cares about this issue, and they, one party basically caters to their wishes, and unlike the abortion issue where you kind of have passionate people on both sides who are really energized about this, with the gun issue, it's really only one side is super impassioned, and then you have, a very small number of advocates on the other side
I agree.
who are against that. So I don't see anything because of that situation. I don't see, and the number, there's I read something 400 million firearms in the country. The past couple of years with 300 plus, 30 million people, or whatever. So I just don't see anything really happening. Even if you implemented something to ban certain things from being manufactured going forward, there's all this stuff out there already. And yes, I just don't see that changing. But I understand why, if that's your concern, that's something you would vote about. But let's talk about what else besides that made you think President Donald J. Trump 4 more years.
Yeah, well, so before we leave it, let me say this. This is what I would love to see. I would love to see the right and the left come together and just say, hey, with abortion and gun control, we're just going to leave it alone. We're going to leave it alone, okay? It's not ideal. Neither side loves where the other is, right? It's not. We don't have to agree, but I think we should just hit pause. Mm-hmm. Nobody's going to do anything on abortion. Nobody's going to do anything on guns. Not that we can't do anything at all, right? But let's, if you want to tweak some things on the margins, great. But as far as, Amy Coney Barrett getting confirmed, she's going to strike down Roe v. Wade, or if Biden wins, he's going to take all my guns away. We should move past these two things to make it harder for however many millions of single issue voters. I just think we should move past it. I think we could. I don't understand why that doesn't happen.
I mean, I see both. Well, I see both as intractable problems that can't really. The gun issue as previously on because there's so many people care passionately about it who have the guns and really care about it, and then the abortion because it's just insoluble. There's always going to be people who disagree about when life begins or whose rights, women's rights versus the fetus's rights or whatever. So I see that as totally intractable and is never going to be. It's not like we're all going to say, oh, fine, we'll just like live and let live kind of thing. People are always going to be very energized about that one. I don't know. But the salience, I mean, the salience of abortion seems to pretty much always be there. The gun thing rises and fades. If there's another gun massacre or if, people get freaked out and are buying a bunch of guns, which apparently they're doing right now. Okay, but let's get to the big man.
Yep.
The big orange man.
The big orange man.
The bad orange man?
Very bad orange man.
Donald Trump. Why are you why did aside from guns, why are you pulling the lever for Trump?
Yeah, so there are a lot of levels, right? If I were to look at it objectively, I think I've got a couple notes over here. I think some of his policies are decent, somewhere between decent to really strong. I just did the hands. I felt like him right there. It's getting out of control. I think his economic policies have been solid. Deregulation. I'm a fan of all of that. I think it is good that he's pushing back on China. I think that is important. I honestly do like what he has done when it comes to issues that are important to the Black community. Criminal justice reform. The funding of the HBCUs, opportunity zones, et cetera. And I like seeing that from a Republican because, honestly, my historical perspective on Republicans and Black America is that they basically just never had anything to say, no solutions beyond like personal responsibility, which I think is, there's something to that, but that shouldn't be the end of it. And so I appreciated actually seeing that stuff. And again, going back to Obama, that was one of my biggest complaints. I didn't think he did enough for Black America. I was hoping to see more on that front. So those are all things that I think are strong. I think he's done pretty well with foreign policy. He's a Republican and he has not started any major wars. This is good. We did not do like a full-fledged invasion of Syria. He managed, I don't want to say he did it, but his administration managed to basically wipe ISIS off the face of the earth, which when that was happening, I was not optimistic. I thought this was, I didn't think they were going to be successful. I thought it was going to be another long, bloody chapter in America's war on terror. I was glad to see how that went down. The Mideast peace deals that he's helping push through, with Israel and their neighbors. These are all good things. With all that being said, most of my reasoning for supporting Trump is really voting against Biden and where I see the Democratic Party going. Do you want me to go right into that, or do you want to talk about any of those other things?
Well, why don't you? Let's see. Well, okay, why don't you say why? Well, do you see your vote as more of an anti-Biden vote than a pro-Trump vote, or equal?
I do.
In equal measures?
Yeah, I do.
Okay, so what don't you like about Biden and the Democrats right now?
Yeah, that's a long list. All right, we talked about guns, right? So that's a non-issue. Honestly, I'm concerned about the direction of the country from a cultural standpoint, ideological standpoint, and how I see, the Democrats making things worse, being the driving force, being the apologist for, sort of depending, but definitely is a big part of it. And I'm going to, again, I just have a list of things. Cancel culture, identity politics, suppression of ideas, suppression of discussion of ideas. Why can't Glenn Loury, if he is supporting Trump, say so on Blogging Heads TV? He's a tenured professor at Brown. The man's 72 years old. He should be able to say that.
Well, that's interesting. I would just say, let me just say that, I think Glenn, God love him, plays a game often where he says something like, you can't say XYZ, and then he says XYZ.
Yeah.
So obviously, literally, you can say it because he just said it. He's a tenured professor, so he would have to really say something totally insane for it to affect his livelihood. Maybe he would lose some friends or something if he said he was supporting Trump. But there are plenty of crazy things you can say in this country. Maybe and very few of them will lead to you suffering any consequences. I mean, you can say the Earth is flat, and maybe you'll lose some friends or something if you are really vehement about that. But you'll probably make a bunch of new friends who agree with you that the Earth is flat, and you'll find your own little flat Earth, society to hang out with. So there's plenty of stuff. I mean, there's some things you can't say, like certain racial slurs and stuff like that. Right. And then there's some things that are somewhere in the middle where people are still arguing about them, and you can say them in some places, not other. And then there are other things where, Glenn says, you can't say that, black women should be marrying the fathers of their children or whatever. He probably didn't say that exactly, but you can say that. And there's probably 500 YouTube channels in which people are saying that. And in fact, a normal person like you and me, who didn't, Glenn could have gotten on TV or something 20 years ago, but you and I couldn't. But now we're able to broadcast because of the technology. So okay. Yeah. That's my response to that part.
No, yeah. I mean, there's something to it. I'd love to come back to it. I don't want to forget this stuff.
Sure.
It makes me really uncomfortable how all of the media, except for right-wing media, seems to essentially be dedicated to supporting the Democratic Party. That makes me very uncomfortable. The censorship that we see overt and covert with the big tech platforms, that makes me very uncomfortable. The lack of ideological diversity in academia makes me really uncomfortable. The excusing, again, overt and implicit, of the rioting, harassment, violence against police, political violence, these things. So all of those issues, and I don't have, they're all related. I don't have a good term that's an umbrella catch-all other than where I see the left going ideologically in the country. And, it's that broader coalition, that movement that is my biggest concern in this election cycle. And that's probably the major reason that I'm voting for Trump, all other things aside.
Okay, that's interesting because I see the logic of that. My response is, most of those things you're objecting to have nothing to do with the Democratic Party and the person of Joe Biden, former vice president and professional politician for 47 years. Biden is the most moderate of the 25 or so people who were trying to capture the Democratic nomination, and he won pretty handily, which shows you that there's some people who attract a lot of attention because they're on Twitter or they are professor at some random university somewhere, and they say something crazy, and then there's the Democratic voters, and the people who put Biden over the edge were older black Democrats in the South, and they did not want what Kamala Harris or Pete Buttigieg were selling. They went with Biden. I think a lot of that is because they saw how Biden, backed up Obama and treated Obama respectfully and never tried to manipulate Obama or for his own ends or anything like that. I think a lot of black voters appreciate that, but also it's just they're more conservative. So I think that the Democratic Party is much more, I think, ideologically diverse than the Republican Party. I mean, there's on any the Democrats are much more like a party of discrete issue groups, where you have the gun people and the anti-gun people and the pro-union people and the anti-abortion people, and they don't necessarily all agree with each other, but they kind of stick together. Whereas the GOP is much more a ideological party devoted to small government conservatism, and people, there's much more agreement within the party about small government, low taxes,
Yeah.
social conservatism, family values, et cetera, hawkish foreign policy. So I mean, I think that's why it's often easier for the GOP to sort of implement its agenda when it has unified powers, because they all basically agree on everything. Whereas, in 2009, when the Democrats had unified power, it was like this huge, complicated thing to get the Affordable Care Act to actually be passed, because they had all these
far enough or whatever.
They had all these interest groups they needed to mollify, and everyone had there were these pro-life Democrats who they need to get these specific carve-outs and blah blah blah. So I think there's that. And yeah, I think you're taking things that you see. I don't know. Well, I'm not going to mind read, but it seems to me like there are things that happen online that are crazy, but these things mostly exist in the online world. The online world and the real world are much more the same thing than they were 10 years ago. And so a tweet can have real world consequences, even if it comes from like a random person. So I agree with that. But at the same time, this is kind of one of the points that Bill Scher, one of my fellow hosts on Blogging Heads, often makes, is like, there were a lot of like far left challengers, so incumbents and stuff, like 3 to 5 of them won. And most of the people who are like running for House seats, newcomers or people who won in 2018 were moderates, and more in the Obama mold and less in the AOC mold or the woke whatever bullshit mold. So the party, I think in some ways certain elites have adopted woke ideology, if we want to use that vague term, and maybe those people work at magazines in New York City or something. So and those people have a certain amount of power because of their the influence of the media, but but really there's not a ton of people who are down for this, and I don't know. So I think that that's part of it. And so one of the policies. So I mean the two big things that the next president is going to have to deal with are the pandemic and the economy. And I don't see cancel culture, woke, whatever, really affecting that. And that seems, the pandemic seems more important to me than cancel culture at this moment. Sure. but that's just how I would read it.
Yeah, no, I see where you're coming from. And I don't disagree. Like, I don't see the Democratic Party as actively pushing some super left woke agenda. I see it more like they're happy to give it cover. They're happy to fan those flames where convenient, because they see ways to make political hay there. And I guess if I really had to think about it, my concern would be not that the Democratic Party is going to, go super far left. That is a concern. That's not my main concern. My main concern would be that they are going to allow certain ideologies to take hold rather than condemning them. And I see that being a problem, as ideas spread. So like if we look at something like, cancel culture and, you mentioned media, I think we should all be alarmed when you see people like Barry Weiss leaving the New York Times and telling us why she's leaving the New York Times. When Glenn Greenwald leaves The Intercept because he says he's being censored, and he founded The Intercept. These things concern me as far as moves toward illiberalism, not just in the Democratic Party, but in the media class, in the idea world. That's a major concern for me. And then as far as the wokeism or whatever on the internet versus the real world, I agree with you there. I do think it's easy for people to have an outsized concern because of what's going on in the internet. But I do think it's starting to reverberate into the real world. But when it comes to hard reality, the riots this summer, there were multiple occasions where, to me, it was incumbent on anybody with a platform to say, hey, maybe we agree with X, Y, and Z, but A, B, and C are completely unacceptable. You can't take over 6 city blocks in downtown Seattle. People live there. People have businesses there. That's not okay. We can't do that, right? 130 or 40 days, whatever the hell it is, of rioting in Portland. At some point, somebody has to say, hey, guys, this is enough. What are you doing? This doesn't make sense. The same goes for attacks on the police and all these other things. And again, I'm not blaming the Democratic Party for this, but I do think it is incumbent upon anybody with a platform to say, hey, this isn't acceptable. And when people don't do that, that makes me think that they're all too happy to let that go because they see some sort of benefit from staying quiet more likely than not.
Yeah, I mean, there was, in the aftermath of the death of George Floyd, there was a lot of nonsense spewed by a lot of people on all sides. And there's a sort of, so I've talked about this before on Twitter. The way to on Twitter, you want to get your tweets to go viral. You want to get more likes and retweets. That's what the game. And the way to do that is to do highly emotionally charged tweets. So if I did a tweet saying, guys, let's all calm down. Let's take a breath. Maybe sit this one out, and we'll all get back to this issue in a month or so. So if I tweeted that, then that would get 2 retweets and 3 likes. And then if I tweeted something like, burn the motherfuckers down, then that would get 50 retweets or whatever.
Million.
And you can do it on the other side. If you tweeted something like, the cops need to crack down and it's time to, take the safeties off the guns and start, bashing some heads in, then that would go viral, more viral also than some sort of plea for, general calm. So that's a really bad incentive that the way social media algorithms work, or the way that social media makes us act, is that the more extreme thing. Do people really believe it when they're typing out, burn the motherfucker down or whatever? God knows, who knows? But 1,000 other people see it and say, yeah, burn the motherfucker down, and they hit retweet. So a lot of other people see it also. So that's bad, and that is a bad evolution in the way we all communicate with each other. So I agree with you. I agree with you there. At the same time, I think most Democratic politicians were pretty responsible during this time. I mean, what happened in the autonomous zone or whatever in Seattle was absurd and poorly handled. That being said, don't you think Seattle and Washington State and Portland and Oregon are going to overwhelmingly vote for Biden in the election? The people who
100%.
were, there were a number of people who were at least strongly inconvenienced, and maybe much worse, if they owned a business in one of those places, in the surrounding area, but the people on the ground, I don't know, it'll be interesting to see if mayoral candidates in those places run on a hard-edged Law and Order thing, and they could make hay out of that. It's possible. But I would say, it's, you have people saying, look at what's happening in Portland right now. Meanwhile, I'm guessing Portland will go 70-30 Biden, and probably is going to go even stronger Biden than it went Hillary in 2016. That's just my guess. We'll see what happens. But I do want to ask you about, so it seems like a lot of your concerns are less about policy and law than about culture and the way we're all interacting with each other and things along those lines. And in my opinion, in that realm, everything has gotten worse because of Trump. So we have to talk about Trump the person, because he has imposed his persona upon all of our upon the country and all of our mental states in a way that no one has in my lifetime, and maybe ever. So he uses Twitter, and he uses Twitter in a very emotional way and gets lots of retweets that way. But he also just says crazy things. We'll say X one day and say not X the next day, and says there's no correlation between them. Of course, he's crude. He cheats on his wife with porn stars. But, we know the litany. He either grabs women by the pussy or he simply brags about it. Either one, not good. Right. And this one, actually, I just saw this yesterday, the day before, but I thought this was just a perfect encapsulation. I'm just going to read this out. This is a slight detour, but I think it'll make sense. So Kirstie Alley, the actress who was in Cheers, and And I actually had a huge crush on her when I was a kid because for some reason I really liked that movie Look Who's Talking, where she was with John Travolta. And I had a big crush on her. And so she is a Trump supporter. I think she was a Scientologist, so she's a little out there. So she tweeted something yesterday.
Okay.
Yes, she tweeted this yesterday. I'll just read this out. She says, "I now know why my personal friends who walk around in sheer terror of contracting COVID are simply CNN viewers. I decided to watch CNN myself to get their viewpoint, and oh my God, did I ever." This is all caps. "If you too want to live in terror, watch CNN. Fear of dying is their mantra. OMG, exclamation point." So then, okay, so that's whatever. She's a wacky celebrity.
Yeah.
So then the official communications account of CNN itself, which is, the handle is CNN PR. So usually they're announcing, like, if someone got hired or something at CNN. Like, they tweeted back, "Kirsty, you're welcome to change the channel, just like countless viewers did every time Veronica's Closet came on TV.
Hey!
But don't downplay the loss of nearly 230,000 American lives, and please wear a mask." So this was like, so then I saw this, and my immediate thought was, this is Trump's America. The people who work in public relations at CNN are doing epic clapbacks to, a B-list nobody celebrity who hasn't been in a movie in 15 years.
Yeah.
And doing it in this super snarky Trumpian way of like, your show was canceled in 1998. Right. And so I mean, no one has degraded public discourse, in my opinion, in our lifetimes, like President Trump. Like he's a bad person in pretty much all ways. And everything it's like okay, this is where people will get on me, but it's like his evil spirit has spread throughout the country and made everyone a lot worse. Like, I feel like I am worse for having imbibed Trumpism and Trump himself and his nonstop blather constantly for the past 4 years. Like, he has been objectively bad for our brains and our souls, I think. I would go so far to say that. And what's your response?
I agree. I really don't disagree with you. I mean, look, I don't like him. I really don't. I don't like the guy. I'm not going to go so far as to say he's a bad person. He seems to be, but I don't know him. But no, man, I agree with all of that. It's tricky. So I just watched Coleman Hughes did a video. I think I saw it yesterday. Why he was voting for Joe Biden, and it was basically all of my concerns about where the left is going. And the conclusion he arrived at is Trump is making this worse. If we elect Trump, all this shit's just going to speed up and get to wherever it's going faster. And he might be right, you know. And honestly, it's closer to a coin flip than I'm comfortable with. It really is. Glenn mentioned this on y'all's show. For me, and he described me when he said this. For me to vote for Biden in the hopes that it would slow down where the left is going feels like some form of blackmail or paying a ransom or something like that. There is logic there. It very well may be the case. I mean, I remember talking to a buddy recently, and I was like, look, man, I think if Trump wins, it will be worse for the country in the short term, but likely better in the medium to long term. And if Biden were to win, I think it would be better in the short term, but I'm more concerned about what it would mean in the medium to long term.
Okay. I think I follow that.
I think people, if Trump wins, I think people are going to absolutely freak out to the extent that he's made your life worse and other people who are just, legitimately bothered by his being. I think it is going to be worse. I guess a big part of where I come down on all of that is, this is, I don't know how to say this without sounding like an asshole. If somebody upsets you, it's largely your responsibility how you take that, right? Like people, I shouldn't be able to do anything to perturb you emotionally. That's a you issue. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So this is like a stoic idea, kind of that. You can only control your emotional reactions to yourself. Right. Everything external world happens, and you have almost no change of it. But I mean, there is one thing I can do, which is vote. And so
absolutely. And let me be clear. I'm not saying everybody who doesn't embody that is somehow, pathetic or something like that. I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying is the what I would say the proper way to view Trump is okay, we've been watching this guy for 4 years. We don't like his character. Okay, got it. Check. I disapprove of his character. This is bad. I don't like it. Got it. We don't like his rhetoric. We don't like his style. We don't like his personality, his persona, all of that stuff. After I arrive at all those conclusions, I try not to continue to be upset by them, right? These things aren't surprising me anymore. I've gotten used to these things. They're not good. I really do not like him for these things, right? I would love somebody with Trump's policies who was not Trump. That would be wonderful. In this particular case, when I sit down and do the calculus, I say all of this stuff is terrible and I hate it. But at the end of the day, I think the other side of the equation is going to be a little bit worse, and so that's why I go the other direction.
Yeah, I mean the question of whether there could be a Trumpism without Trump is one. The previous video that just posted with Bob Wright and Mickey Kaus, they talked about that. It's unknown, and there's some people who say like Don Jr. will be running in 2024. I don't see that at all. Like Trump is a unique personality and a unique world historical figure. And there's no other person you can immediately think of who could do, like, people say Tucker Carlson, but like Tucker Carlson did not have has not been in the public eye since the 1970s and had a reality TV show all about how great he was, for 15 years. So there's no other person. And then if you remove Trump from it, what happens? I mean, I think the most likely thing is kind of a reversion to form for the GOP. And if you think like let's say Trump wins, and then the 2024 frontrunner would be Mike Pence. And then before Trump, Pence was basically a George W. Bush type, although maybe he was more anti-immigration. I can't remember exactly, but the way I understand Pence is he's basically George W. Bush, but more Christian and stupider. So he's a possible, he would be like the favorite just in terms of like how this works out in history. Yeah. And then where would he take the party? It's probably more back towards the Bushism, kind of like compassionate conservatism, big government. Yeah. But anti-abortion, immigration. Maybe Trump has permanently changed the party in terms of immigration, but I don't know exactly how much else he's left a permanent mark. I mean, the thing is, I've talked about this and people disagree with me. He doesn't care about politics, really. He doesn't care about policy, certainly. He has no real policy preferences. He kind of just repeats whatever the last thing he heard was. He has certain like dispositions or prejudices, like in the literal sense. Like he doesn't particularly like foreigners who aren't from Europe, and so on and so forth. So he, enacts policies that like flow from that, but it's not like he has this very strong commitment to any particular policy. Like building the wall was his signature policy. And the wall is like 15% built or something at that, and Mexico did not pay for it. So he can be talked into. Paul Ryan talked him into passing Paul Ryan's tax cut, and the three. It's not like he appointed a Trumpy Supreme Court justice. Like the three he appointed, if Marco Rubio had been president, probably would have been the same three people, maybe in a different order. So the one thing is there was no cadre of mini Trumpists, to like follow him. It's really just Stephen Miller, and that's it. Because everyone else was against him from the beginning within the party, and so there was no like the people who write legislation or write the rules in the various agencies and stuff. Like they are not committed to the Trumpist project. They're just kind of like keeping their heads down until he's out of there. So I don't see a very strong legacy in terms of like maybe like Reagan made the party like permanently anti-abortion or something like that. I see it. I see his legacy more in the bring reality television to politics and making it like a circus where you're always like, what crazy thing's going to happen next? So basically, a lot of bad things in terms of the culture and the cult of personality around him. I mean, the thing that this is really the whole Trump experience has made me think is that the president, like we need to like downgrade this office somehow. It's like
100%.
It's too strong.
I would love that.
It just it's long been like the national god figure or national like Big Daddy or something, where we're all like all the little children or something of the president. It's a sick thing in American culture, and Trump's disordered personality has just revealed that there's just way too much happening with this office. It'd be much better if we had something like a prime minister where we could just say, this is your job. It's not like you're like the greatest guy in the world who we all have to look up to. And then when it's your time to leave, you just like, you're out of there. And that's it. So I see, I mean, but I would just say, in terms of the emotional reaction to Trump, I actually wrote a piece, which we'll link to on the Blogging Heads site, in about 6 months into the start of the administration, that was called, basically how I came to have a sort of like Zen-like perspective on Trump. And it had to do with his absurdity. And I won't fully recapitulate it, but like he is, the fact that he is president is fundamentally absurd. And, if this could happen, then like what does any of it really matter? It'd be like, it's, Nero like appointing his horse senator or something like that. It's like, this is all kind of a joke. Like, we're as kids, we're taught to revere the Constitution in school. It's like, our great founding fathers came up with this system that, protects all minority interests, and the Bill of Rights is so great. But like the system produced Trump as president. That's absurd. Like the system is pretty fucked. And I once I realized this, I was kind of like, okay, it's all a joke. I guess I was thrown into like existentialism or something, or nihilism by Trump's election. So after that, I generally am not the type of person who's flying off the handle. That's why it's funny when people in the comments on YouTube accuse me of Trump Derangement Syndrome, because he doesn't. There's people who are like, every time there's some new Trump thing, they're like, they can't believe it. Their hair are on fire. I'm just like, oh, this is just one more piece of bullshit. Who cares? Let's just laugh at it. That's kind of my perspective. But okay, let me see. I feel like there was one other area I wanted to talk about.
Can I touch on a couple things that you brought up before I forget?
Go ahead.
So first off, as far as the Zen perspective goes, it sounds like you should be grateful for Trump, right? He's liberated you from the eternal hell of electoral politics. So thank you, Trump, for that.
Well, this is like who is the main Stoic guy? I can't remember his name.
Marcus Aurelius.
Well, who's the one who had like the withered limb? It's like, is he? And then, like,
I don't know. Was maybe Seneca or Epictetus?
Yeah, it's like, is he grateful for his withered limb so that he was able to achieve enlightenment or something? I don't know.
Right, exactly. Of course I'm joking there. But no, you brought up the future of the party. And honestly, I'm hopeful, probably foolishly optimistic. Every time I catch myself thinking about this, I have to remind myself that I've essentially hated the Republican Party for a very, very, very long time. And I don't want to get ahead of myself. I'm hopeful that Trump is going to leave such a void that can't be filled, because there isn't going to be a Trump 2, that the party will have a chance to start from scratch. And there are some things that I find to be, hopeful. You look at somebody like Dan Crenshaw. I think we could use more Dan Crenshaws. I don't know if he wants to run for president.
This is the Texas representative who
exactly.
has an eye patch and was
eye patch, Navy SEAL. Yeah. Super reasonable guy, right? I don't know if you're how familiar you are with him, but he's a very reasonable guy. I think we could have more of those. I think there is now going to be room for people who have strong policy positions and who are reasonable, and who seem to be of strong moral character. And then also, we're seeing a lot of movement when it comes to Black America leaving the Democratic Party, which I'm also super hopeful for. You look at somebody like Kimberly Klacik. I would love the Republican Party to become the party of disaffected Black voters and, reasonable, policy-oriented people everywhere. I don't know if it's going to happen, but I'm hopeful.
So I don't even. So who is Kimberly Klacik? I don't even know who that is.
Okay. So Kim Klacik is running for a congressional seat out of Baltimore City, which has been democratically controlled for forever. She's making a lot of waves, making a lot of noise. The last I heard, her in an interview, she was basically saying that the RNC was not supporting her, which doesn't surprise me. But basically her line is, in Baltimore, it's the city has been terribly mismanaged for an extremely long time. So instead of continuing to vote for the same people, let's try something different. And here are some ideas. And there are others like her around the country running for congressional seats. So I would love to see more of that. I don't think we're going to know the actual numbers for a while, but we do see Trump getting more of the black vote. I hope that doesn't just disappear when Trump leaves office. I hope whoever's coming next is going to be smart enough to say, hey, what can we actually do to earn these votes and actually, make change in areas that desperately need change. So I'm hopeful. We'll see. A younger, more inclusive Republican Party. We'll see.
Okay, I wouldn't bet on it. I mean, I'm very skeptical. Okay, I'm very skeptical.
To be clear, yeah.
I'm very skeptical of the Blexit stuff of blacks leaving the GOP leaving the Democrats for the GOP. I think that is not really happening. I mean, I guess I saw some polling that Trump is attracting more black and Latino men, but fewer black and Latino women. So it could just be a wash in terms of raw numbers, which I guess would make sense to me. I mean, I don't think it's like a healthy thing that the Democrats can count on 90+% of the black vote every 4 years. I think that's bad overall, and it makes it so that the Republicans don't really play for those voters. I guess Trump is trying it a little bit. This kind of seems like it's Jared Kushner's initiative with the criminal justice reform bill that was passed, which does seem like a positive thing. And wouldn't, I assume if President Hillary Clinton had introduced that bill, it wouldn't have passed, but it was just that Trump, the same exact bill probably wouldn't have passed if the Democrats were pushing it. Is the fact that Trump was pushing it. So that's probably a good thing. But I don't see a super change. And I think as far as I can tell, the black voters do like Biden.
Right.
And I think they're probably going to stick with him for now. Maybe if there's some different candidate who, or a different challenger, then things could change there. But yeah, the GOP generally ignores black voters and Democrats take them for granted. And that's a bad thing. But yeah, Crenshaw, I guess I haven't paid super close attention to him. I guess I see, this is the classic thing of you see the, you only see the tweets from the opposite side when it's the bad, crazy stuff,
right.
Because those are the ones that people bring in. So I don't, when you called him a reasonable guy, that was surprising to me because my sense of him was he was kind of a Trumper. But maybe not. So I'll take another look at him and the, Brett Weinstein, paired Tulsi Gabbard and Crenshaw in his dream ticket
all day long,
which I thought. Well, I just, which I guess that appeals to you because you said you like Gabbard, but that to me just showed that Brett Weinstein doesn't understand a lot about American politics, and he thought that this could somehow happen. But he has a podcast, so that's something. I'm a fan of his. Unity 2020. His heart was in the right place. I never thought I had a snowball's chance in hell, and as it turned out, it didn't. But it goes back to what you were saying about how fucked the whole system is. So when I hear a really smart, reasonable guy like him bring something to the table, I was like, hey man, I don't think it's going to work. But good on you. It's better than not trying anything. I would say he means well, but I don't know if I would go much further than that. But I guess the other thing is, could the GOP, could there be a party realignment? It seemed like Trump was he could have pulled off some sort of actual party realignment that hasn't happened since the Civil Rights Bill was signed, because he really he's not a Republican. He has an idiosyncratic set of beliefs, and he could have pulled in Democrats and somehow realign things, and this is what Steve Bannon wanted to happen. And I think Trump didn't care enough to try to do it, and even if he did, he was too stupid to pull it off. It would have been difficult anyway. But since, as an outsider, he could have tried something, but instead he just allied himself to the GOP completely and didn't really make a lot of overtures to the other side. So the realignment that seems to be happening instead is like the never Trumpers, who there's not that many of them, but there's people who have been disgusted by Trump and for various reasons, and they're like coming over to Biden. So hard to know how many people there are like this, but the sort of, especially the national security hawks are very, there's a lot of them in the never Trump stuff. If those people who are mostly in the elite, there's not a ton of normal voters who care about that foreign policy to begin with. But if they come over to the Democrats, then it's interesting to think, where is the GOP foreign policy going to go? Maybe, I guess, in a more America First isolationist direction or what? So that is interesting. But it's like I don't know if you watched Simpsons as a kid, but there was the one.
I definitely did. Okay,
the Treehouse of Horror, where it's in 1996, where it reveals that Clinton and Dole have been replaced by two aliens. And I don't remember. This is a classic. I'll include a link to it. And
please.
And so once it's revealed that they pull their heads off, and it's revealed that it's Krang and Kodos, the two aliens.
Sure.
They're like, you have to vote for one of us, and then someone's like, what about the third party? And one of them says, it's a two-party system. Go ahead, throw your vote away. Right. And so it's like, it really is a two-party system, and you could imagine. It's very hard to imagine a challenger party replacing one of the current two parties unless something totally crazy happens. So we're stuck with these two lousy parties, and we have to work within them and change them rather than trying to start the Donald Trump party or something. And so he was canny in seeing that he should run as Republican, not as independent. But and it's the things are going to happen within the parties, and there'll maybe be some switching. But I think we're stuck with these. We're stuck with them for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, I'm afraid you're right. And I don't know. You probably have a better sense of this than I do. I don't have any faith in the Democratic Party shifting course from the things that concern me that we talked about. Again, I'm not optimistic that the Republican Party does anything like we discussed, but it's possible, and I think it would make sense. If I could appear in front of every traditional Republican voter, and talk to them, why can the Republican Party not, whatever, man? Push a couple reasonable criminal justice things through, do something reasonable on education and economic opportunities for minority groups. Say that nobody's going to try to make abortions illegal, legalize marijuana, mainstream ideas that I actually don't think people have a problem with. I really think it's probably the RNC and some of the, legacy actual Republican politicians that are in the way. And I hope somebody with some intelligence over there realizes that they're losing culturally, they're losing demographically. And, now would be a wonderful time to make a tiny adjustment, on sort of social policy, one little click left, and actually bring some real policy prescriptions to the table. And I think there are votes there. I think they'll do it. I don't.
It would have been very easy for Trump to embrace marijuana decriminalization or something like that.
Totally.
And that would have appealed to younger voters, appealed to non-white voters, urban voters, and but he didn't. I guess because he doesn't care. And just the people around him are not in favor of that kind of thing. But that sort of, if you imagine a Trump type figure who actually has imaginative thinking to try to really change things, then it's possible there'd be some sort of big change. But we have the Trump like figure, but all he thinks about is Sean Hannity's next show and whether Sean's going to be happy about what he did or mad about it. So
totally.
So
it's a big mystery to me as for the Donald whatever's inside of Donald Trump's skull. Because I certainly agree that he seems to really not care about many things on a deep policy level, but he does seem. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's people around him or what. He seems to make some really good decisions behind the scenes. He has done more than many GOP presidents in the past, and I don't know what to ascribe that to. But like one of the things that really impressed me about him was, you remember when the drone was shot down by Iran, and all the hawks, in his circle, including John Bolton, were pushing for some sort of overt military action, and he decided no, because he didn't think the civilian toll would warranted or was a warranted response to what had happened. That was extremely refreshing to me, and I thought was a tiny window into some decision-making power that he has that's sound. My gut, I think it has something to do with when he's not directly being challenged, when his ego's not being challenged, when he's not worried about how he's being perceived in the moment. Maybe he has really good decision-making ability. I don't know. But
I wouldn't go that far.
I don't know. But there's something about it. Like there is some maybe even genius there, if nothing else. In his I don't know, in his ability to succeed. I don't know. It's very bizarre to me. I can't figure it out.
Yeah, I mean, it might be something like, the average president who didn't serve in the military, they get in there and then they're like all these generals telling them do X, Y, Z, and so they think, well, these guys know what they're talking about, and they have all these medals on their chests, and so I'll go along with them, and if I go against them, then they're going to try to sabotage me or something, so I might as well just go along with them. Whereas Trump is just I'm smarter than you, I could have I could have been a general. He thinks he's the best about everything. So he just maybe thinks he can outsmart everyone.
Maybe, yeah.
And so that, but I mean, I there's this joke. I've mentioned this before on the show. Trump's razor, a play on Occam's razor, which is, and whenever there's a mystery about Trump, the stupidest explanation is the most likely one. And so it could just be he thinks he's smarter than the generals, and so that's what he does. So I just want to. We're maybe moving towards the end of our time. I just want to say I voted for Biden. I voted by mail a couple weeks ago. And I enthusiastically voted for Biden, but I'm not optimistic. So I guess this is too pessimist in this episode. I'm not optimistic about a Biden administration really turning the country around. I think they'll do a better job on the pandemic, but at the same time, now that if Biden's in charge and he's telling people to wear masks, there's going to be even more people who are pissed off, who are saying, I'm not going to wear a damn mask. This is America. So so there's going to be more active in the way that Trump activated left-wing crazies is going to be activated right-wing crazies, and Biden himself is basically a moderate and is not he's a huge institutionalist. He was in the Senate for 40 years or whatever, so he is not he's not going to pack the courts. Maybe they'll end the filibuster, who knows, but he's not going to try to do things that are dramatic. I do think he'll have people who are more competent working for him who will do a better job about confronting the pandemic, which is the major national problem right now. So I think that will hopefully get better. But in terms of in 2008 I was optimistic about Obama really changing things, and he didn't really. But now I'm not optimistic about Biden really changing things. It's more additional new awful things will not be continually happening because Trump is not in office. And as I said in the previous episode, just tamping down the national temperature and the sense that we're all on edge because what crazy thing's going to happen next. Politics will return to a more normal part of the country instead of being the central focus, and the soap opera reality show aspect of it will hopefully go away, and that will just turn the temperature down, and it won't be a return to normalcy because things have been fucked up too much because of the pandemic, but it will be, life will be somewhat more normal than in the Trump years when life is strange. If Biden wins, I hope you're right. The concern I have about sort of the direction of I don't know, whatever you want to call it, liberal ideology, whatever. I think we have to remember that I would argue a big reason that Trump was elected was because of those movements in the first place. So I think in the short term, the heat would be tamped down to a degree. I'm not confident that the division in the country would really be ameliorated to any substantial degree in a longer term.
Yeah, and again, if Trump wins, I don't see that happening either. So I don't know, man. I think that's the big question of our day: is how do we try to bridge that divide and calm people down and have less political violence? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think some commenters pointed this out, which is a good point, but it's not exactly the original one. But returning to normalcy, if we return to like the day before Donald Trump declared that he was running for president, obviously there were a lot of things under the surface that were happening that enabled him to become president. So we can't just go back. It's not just like we can go back to what it was, because that could produce another Donald Trump type figure, although I think he's very unusual, especially, and it's mainly about reality television that enabled him to rise, and there's no other figure who could rise up exactly like him. But yeah, the Trump's election revealed that there was a lot more under the surface about the country that was fucked up and wrong and wasn't being addressed. And I don't know if I highly doubt actually that Biden is the one who's going to address that. But maybe he'll rise to the occasion. Who knows? Yeah, if he is the next president, he's going to need help. Okay, I think we're about at the end of our time. Is there anything, any final points you want to make that you forgot to mention?
I don't know, man. God, we covered a lot. No, nothing's coming to mind. Nothing's coming to mind. No, I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thanks for coming on. Taking the courageous step of putting your face on video so that people can attack you and call you names and so forth. And is there anything you want to plug? You said you're not a big social media guy. You said, do you have a website or anything like that, or just?
Yeah, no, man. So I'm in the process of getting a podcast off the ground. Funny enough, it's called Everything Is Fucked, a podcast about solutions. I'm still trying to decide if I want to spell fucked in the traditional sense or FUKT for the purposes of sidestepping potential censorship issues. Still sorting that out. But yeah, I would love to basically have conversations like this on that podcast. I'd like to dive into specific policy issues much more deeply. Again, Everything's Fucked, a podcast about solutions. That's the idea. Until then, I reactivated my Twitter for this very purpose. It's hilarious. There's nothing there. You'll see a few posts that make me look like a crazy lefty from like 2014. But that's it's J. Carl Guth. So the letter J, CarlGuth, J. Carl Guth. And yeah, again, I'm John Guthrie. And come over, follow me, and then when I get the pod in order, I'll post it there and people can see it.
Okay, cool. Thank you again for taking the time. And thank you to all of our viewers and listeners. You can rate and review this in various places if you want to do that thing, but you don't have to. I won't be mad at you. Thanks again for coming on, and we'll see you again next time.
Great. Thank you so much.